Hello, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us here today and welcome to CIO Leadership Live. I'm your host, Maryfran Johnson, CEO of Maryfran Johnson Media and a contributing columnist on CIO.com. Twice a month, we produce CIO Leadership Live with the generous support of my friends at CIO.com and our CIO Executive Council. We're streaming live to you right now on CIO.com's LinkedIn channel and also on CIO's YouTube channel. And we welcome any of our live viewers with us today to join in this conversation and pipe in with your own questions for my guest. We'll be watching for those questions and doing our best to pass them along. I'm very pleased today to be joined by Dilip Venkatachari, who is the Global Chief Technology and Information Officer for US Bank. Employing nearly 70,000 people in 13 countries, Minneapolis-based US Bank Corp is the fifth largest commercial bank in the United States. With $23 billion in annual revenue across its four lines of business, the bank is managing more than $570 billion in assets globally, and it ranks at number 150 in the Fortune 500. Dilip joined US Bank in 2018 with a long track record of success in the payments industry and a very diverse background as a tech executive, a startup founder, an entrepreneur, and a board member. He's held senior executive roles at Google and PayPal. He's worked at McKinsey, helping banks accelerate their digital transformations. He's co-founded several startups, including Compass Labs, Cash Edge, and CommerceSoft. And on top of all that, he holds more than a dozen US patents in the fields of analytics, financial transactions, risk management, customer interaction technologies, and even digital marketing. Now in his first ever banking CIO job, Dilip is responsible for US Bank's global technology infrastructure, its capabilities, and all of its services around the world. And of course, also in ensuring its digital and technology transformation work. That is a lot going on, Dilip. Thanks so much for joining us today. Hello.
Thank you, Maryfran, for having me here.
Well, you have had a front row seat on the financial industry's very rapid shift to digital services, which of course had to accelerate at unheard of paces throughout most of these disruptive pandemic years. Tell us what you consider the most dramatic and lasting changes for banks in the financial industry and their customers.
A lot has changed in the last, certainly in the last few years, much more so than ever before. And what has changed, I think, are in two or three kind of significant aspects. The first is the one that you referenced, digital. The customers previously, about 4 or 5 years ago, we had across the banking environment in the US, about 50-60% of all customers were engaged digitally. Now, all of a sudden, we are at close to, I think, about 80% or more of customers engaging digitally, which means basically, literally over 80% of all transactions, of all customer checking account transactions, of mortgages, of loans, and things of that nature, are all conducted through digital channels. A huge, huge change. That's kind of the first one. And that's true, though, of kind of the rest of the world. Your retail experience has changed as well. What's interesting is in financial services are two other particularly unusual things. Financial services are now increasingly got integrated into people's kind of other lives, so to speak. They're not necessarily thought about as being distinct. For example, if you're a small business and you're considering things like accounts payable, as you go through your accounts payable, increasingly banking services are incorporated and integrated into the flow. So through your, for example, your account payable software, it automatically makes banking transactions and so on. So it's embedded into people's kind of daily lives. And kind of the last huge change is frankly technology. Technology has suddenly become central to banking. Previously, it used to be important. It used to be critical key to delivering reliable financial services, which that still is required. But more than that now, kind of the shift is towards what can be offered. Technology enables new services, new kinds of products to be offered. Technology also tells you kind of when enables it to be done either faster or much more slowly. So the nature, the quality of the technology kind of matters. And finally, it kind of drives a lot of the economics and eventually the competitive nature of banking. So
Yes.
all those three things have changed dramatically, and we can continue to see more change on the horizon.
Yes. Well, and I found a quote that I thought was particularly apt to our conversation today from your chairman and president of the bank, Andy Cesare, where he said it's been a dramatic time of change in the banking industry where success is increasingly driven by technology capabilities. And that stood out to me a little bit because until very recent years, it was unusual to hear CEOs even drawing attention to technology capabilities. I would imagine that doesn't exactly let the pressure up on you as the CIO.
Absolutely. It's become very central to financial services, and this works now across consumer banking or payments or commercial and corporate services as well. Mm-hmm. So it's really a new world, and it's not just technology as in the traditional. There's something called technology, there's something called business. Now the two are a lot more integrated. So the business teams inherently understand technology a lot more and kind of use that instinctively as opposed to thinking about this as an external, as something else. It's almost, you can think about this as the iPhoneization of technology. I mean, you don't think about the fact that you have a multi-gigahertz processor in your pocket or in your hands every day, but you just think about that as telling you, which direction to turn, like right or left.
Mm-hmm. Well, people who really deeply understand technology could probably tell you the things we do with our Androids and our iPhones today are essentially, it's like a supercomputer in your pocket. And everybody, I guess, is taking that for granted these days. One of the things that we talked about was in fact, the first major hit that the banking industry took were the number of transactions in your customer base and how they skyrocketed. We talked about the strain on the infrastructure and the technology built for volume and traffic. Is that something that the technology organizations were well prepared to respond to, but it was more difficult to turn things around on the business side? How did you experience that at the bank?
It's a great point you bring up. So if I kind of go back in time with the start of the pandemic, what suddenly happened within a very short amount of time, maybe a few weeks, is that prior to the pandemic, a good number of customers for most banks were coming into the retail branch. And so if you can think about it, a person showing up in the retail branch maybe shows up at the branch maybe once a month or twice a month, depending upon their transaction needs. But when you have digital banking or mobile banking, you are more likely to do that every day, maybe several times a day. And if you're working from home, you have more likelihood of in fact, even doing it more often. And what we realized was, at the times of, during the height of the pandemic, at the times of things like stimulus checks, on the day the federal government announced the checks being issued, almost everyone would, pick up their phones and check their balances to see the checks have cashed in. So
has it arrived?
Within a very short window, a huge amount of transactions. So we literally saw, several, 10x increase in peak volumes. And so those kinds of demands in the system were unprecedented and have kind of led to changes, both in the the technology standpoint. The business teams use that to say, how do we restructure our services to make it, for example, less requiring customers to even check? Maybe we let them know ahead of time and do things to essentially improve customer experience, and of course at the same time reduce the strain of the systems in at peak time.
Right. Well, and I saw one comparison figure that was quite startling, that back in 2019, you still had a significant number of your customers using the mobile app. It was something like 70% of your customers were making some use of it. And just 2 years later, end of 2021, that number was now 81% of transactions. And I mean, I'm always telling people I'm no math major, but that seems like a pretty enormous jump.
It's a huge jump, and a huge credit and kudos go out to all our teams, our customer experience teams, our technology teams, and our people at the front end on the retail banking side who kind of pointed to what might be most kind of valuable. So now we have consistently, as you pointed out, well north of 80% transactions of most kinds occurring through the mobile. And we're also very thankful, for example, that we have been named as one of the top mobile apps by multiple industry groups. And so that's something that requires obviously kind of constant work to maintain that, but it is a very important critical channel for us, and becoming increasingly the primary channel of interaction.
Now, one of the other things we talked about with all of your background in startups and involved in smaller companies that would act very quickly and turn on a dime and have that sort of flexibility. What was it in that experience that you were able to bring to US Bank? Because US Bank is enormous. It's not a startup by any means, but that kind of fast-moving flexibility, every now and then you hear large enterprises talk about behaving more like startups, and you actually had to at the time. Tell us about what some of the principles were that you put into action that made that work.
Sure, it's actually we went through some very critical but simple things. If you go back to it, the key is to cut the complexity and keep it very simple. As in each work stream, so sometimes there's a tendency in large enterprises to look at multiple things as everything as being one complex set of interdependent pieces which all need a lot of people to make decisions. But human beings are very good when they have a clear sense of purpose and frankly a well-defined one. And so a big part of what we did, I'll give you one example. The PPP programs are a great example. So this was the kind of stimulus programs geared towards small businesses, where the federal government through the SBA was providing loans and sometimes grants to small businesses to keep employment alive and to keep small businesses alive and provide more employment opportunities to kind of more people. Yes. So as part of the process, we as banks and all banks went through this, but we had to significantly, in very short time order, provide funding to a lot of banks, to a lot of businesses, and to our customers and to others who potentially were kind of new customers. And this required us to do things that normally took a lot of time, to define policies and practices, and what are the kind of the credit qualifications, how do you kind of exercise all of those things, how do you bring the decisioning to all of that. And so what we had to do was to literally in a couple of weeks define the program, stand it up, build all the technology pipes, and mind you, this was, in a sense, we are funneling money, flowing through at the pace of oil almost, one way to think about it. And to do that, and to do it with all the risk and compliance controls is quite a task. But the teams did a great job, because we changed the operating model to work somewhat like what you can think about it as either startup companies, or you can think about it as a product model, where you had well-defined 3 or 4 priorities, not 40. And each of the priorities had a specific single owner, and the decision making, the process of decisioning was kind of daily, where teams would get together, not with a lot of planned PowerPoint preparation of documents, but would kind of talk through, here's the 5 things I'm doing today, and people would debate, should we be doing something else instead? And the next morning they would say, this worked, this did not work, here's how we're going to change pace, change track, and do something else. And that process really taught us that large enterprises, and we in particular, can be as efficient, can be as effective, and as nimble as early stage companies if we essentially adopt some of those practices. And that's really what we're going about right now.
Okay.
As we we learned from that process and are now going through essentially scaling it up across our organization to to provide that clarity, to provide that kind of the level of nimbleness to each of our teams.
Right. Well, and I was wondering that too, in the early days, like the things you were doing in 2020, probably now in 2022, there's not that sense of, maybe not the sense of emergency and, the need for daily stand-ups with huge amounts of people and that sort of thing. But what kind of processes got more efficient and changed over time that stuck with it? I'm just wondering, when you think about then and now, what were the changes that you've seen essentially become permanent? Did the decision-making hierarchy essentially flatten out and stay flattened?
I think a few things got kind of much clearer. The first one that I'd say is sharper understanding of customer needs, because customer needs are really a large set. The key is to distill them into the 2, 3, 4 things that really, really matter. And so we as an organization, as a bank, are much better at doing this than we were several years ago, and that's a key. And you can see that in the quality of the product and the customer response to that. That's one. The second, we have simplified and are continuing to simplify the decision-making process, which any large enterprise has. And people sometimes think about regulated entities as being inherently unable to do that. But what I think we proved is you can coexist with a clearer, sharper decision-making process and clear accountability. At the same time, enable kind of the full rigor of risk management to be exercised. And so that's the second one. The last one has to do with technology. Technology has changed and continued to change quite a bit. And so we have significantly kind of modernized our technology stack to enable, because you also need the tools to be able to essentially affect all of those things and to do them in fairly quicker, higher velocity and higher pace, velocity and pace of change.
Got it. Well, and we have a question from our audience tuned in, which is right in line with what we're talking about here, mentioning all the regulatory environment and the fact that banking has a lot of compliance requirements, of course, it has to meet. How do you manage that with a rapid move to digital and cloud services? And I'm assuming that there is a security and a protection aspect built into that as well. But that's a big question.
A very good question.
You pick your angle on that one.
It's a very good question, and so let me try to at least simplify it. I mean, it's got a lot of different details, but the first and foremost is banks, and we are particularly good at this as a bank, which is we have fairly rigorous security and risk policies and practices. The first thing to do for us is to distill them into, essentially integrate them into the development pipeline. So, for the most part, you don't have to necessarily do them, after the fact, but as code is being developed, as code is being built, it'll automatically go through the tests to confirm compliance with the policy and to develop the evidence required to essentially substantiate that it does comply. And so all of that being automated. So it doesn't, so it's not necessarily a separate after the fact task, but it's kind of incorporated. Huge benefit. Second, streamlining a lot of automating, frankly, a lot of the processes that compliance and kind of technology development typically are kind of in the middle of as part of a more comprehensive regulatory regime. And so automation actually in some respect in both of these increases the quality and the predictability of the risk. You're not letting it to just human kind of error, but by automating it, not only do you have higher chance of it happening, you also are able to generate the evidence which a risk officer or a compliance person can use to substantiate that. And certainly the last one is as the questionnaire kind of referenced, moving towards new development tools and methodologies that enable all of this. So it's changing really how we work as much as what we work on.
That's it. Well, and that's a great way to phrase it too, as much how we work as the way we're working on it. Let's delve into a few more of the details and examples about how your digital business models have advanced and adapted over this recent years. I know when we spoke about this earlier, you mentioned that when you think about digital, you've really got two sets of customers. On the one hand, it's retail customers, and then on the other side, it's the large entities that you deal with. So let's talk through some of those examples.
Sure. I'll give you a few kind of very interesting examples, and they start from what appears to be simple, but it's actually pretty profound. We launched our first. We were the first, I think, kind of large bank in the nation to launch a Spanish language voice assistant, and this is actually as much technology in enabling a high value, high impact customer feature, because what in effect we did was to enable the same set of data, the same set of prompts, the same set of information, to be certainly language agnostic to be translated, but also all of the ability to understand, interpret language. And there are so many tools out there that enable all that to be done, but putting them together in a manner that provided the most specific customer experience, most usable customer experience for a segment was a big deal. And we felt that was a kind of a major milestone. Yeah. The other, so this is for in any consumer service, of course, for banking as well, but certainly consumer services is where I think that have the most profound impact. On the businesses, on the small businesses, we launched products that help small businesses better predict and project their cash flows.
Yes.
Which is critical to their operational kind of life. And also we launched a TALC register for small businesses. And all of these, by the way, are various examples of where we are operating at the pace of delivering products at a very rapid pace and leveraging kind of the energy and kind of the ecosystem a lot more as well. So huge advances both in consumer and in kind of the corporate side where there are high value things being kind of delivered. And all of this gets back to, and maybe we can explore this eventually, but some new technology kind of trends in terms of how do you better use data, how do you kind of simplify the silos and better use machine learning and artificial intelligence to predict kind of what customers would need, to extract insights that you can kind of use that to to help customers, in fact, answer questions, even before they potentially have a need to ask them and so on.
Yes, well, and that has long been the dream of everything to do with data, hasn't it? The predictive, we used to talk about predictive analytics, and now we talk about AI and machine learning in kind of much the same vein. And I was thinking that one of the other things that you said when we talked earlier was how you got your technology organization got very good at understanding the customer experience and the journey they were on, largely through probably some of these new tools. How has that changed the working relationship or maybe the culture in the IT organization in working with the customers and with all the other parts of a very big business you have around the world?
This is a very good point you're bringing up, which is as part of this trend, as part of this change, the IT teams, the technology teams, the developer teams are working much more closely with the business part. Yes. So business teams, and so it's really one collaborative team. Prior to the pandemic, most of them were in kind of agile kind of studios, working, side by side. Of course, now that's being continued in a hybrid manner, both kind of remote and kind of on site. But that, kind of working closely together lets the technology teams understand customer needs directly, without multiple levels of kind of information being passed from team to team. It's kind of direct understanding. And that helps them not just understand, but also influence kind of what would be helpful, work with the business teams, with the experience teams to kind of define kind of the art of the possible as well. So there's been a lot of that happening. At the same time, internally with the technology teams, we've gone through we're in the midst, actually, I would say, of a cultural change where we're becoming a more, towards a more engineering-oriented culture where, with kind of fewer hierarchy, kind of layers, fewer layers, and kind of less hierarchy, having people take more active responsibility for learning as well. Learning is a big part of what we do, one part of it, a slight digression. One of the interesting kind of trends that we have seen is technology has been changing, and that rate of change is increasing. And everyone likes to talk about changes much faster in the last 2 years than the last 20. But what that means is people have to learn new things, new technologies, new tools, and also new ways of working. And those things are constant. So the only constant right now for us is change, and change requires learning. So what we're trying to do internally is change and create a culture where learning is essentially a kind of intrinsic part of what you do, setting aside time for that, explicitly time with the team, but more importantly, encouraging that through hackathons and a variety of other exercises apart from of training courses, so that people can take advantage of learning and being able to test them in practice, so they get better at that as well.
Talk a little bit about how the technology organization is structured today, especially compared to 2018 when you got there. Do you have it built in different segments? You mentioned working largely on a product model rather than projects. And that's probably not 100% all product models, but perhaps it is. Tell us more about the way the technology organization is structured today, and what, if anything, you made changes to in your a little more than 4 years there now as the CIO.
Sure, I think the changes are kind of multiple, and the organization. I mean, I was very fortunate to join a terrific team, and blessed with kind of the both people who truly have the skills and their passion for what they do. So that combination is very critical, and kind of a sense of commitment, sense of values, sense of kind of need to develop things for our customers. So we were starting from a great place. So just want to kind of put that out there, that it's not the change necessarily that's causing the value, it's that we did have a great place to start from. Yes. The changes had to do with more, I think broadly two or three things. We increase the kind of the collaboration between the businesses and technologies. Lots of kind of minor to major organizational changes that essentially enable tighter bonding, tighter collaboration, bringing kind of the technology teams much closer to the customer, and at the same time, keeping in making the technology teams aware that their objective is not the project completion, but the customer need being satisfied, and the customers, essentially voting with their, by themselves, as opposed to us kind of declaring a project completed. So it's a huge change, and most people actually want that. They want to know why am I doing something? What customer value am I delivering? So a lot of organization changes. At the same time, it was also backed by a lot of changes in the tools, the technologies, automating some of the tasks, manual tasks, and we also brought the risk, security, and technology teams a lot closer. They work together as a team to solve it, as opposed to independent silos. And so, parts of it, for example, because most large enterprises have data in different business units, typically always in different silos. One of the first initiatives we undertook was to create a common unified data platform that essentially brought across all the customer data to whichever business a customer is currently involved in. So you can kind of bring the kind of the insights, the learning, to help the customer journey in a more comprehensive and a more complete manner. And so it's kind of a lot of the changes in kind of tools, and frankly, a lot of skill building and upskilling. So a combination of different things. And as we look at, one of the things we do a lot is look at employees' satisfaction. Very, very pleased that all of those are doing very well, and are we continue to be kind of regarded by our employees as a great place to work.
Well, and another point that you made when we spoke earlier, and you thought we were talking about training and upskilling, and you told me you were blown away by the amount of demand, and you had to keep adjusting goals up on some of the technology adoption programs that you had in going on, especially to do with training programs for new technical skills. And that was unusual. Apparently, even your vendor partner was surprised by how much people were pushing to go faster.
Absolutely. So we announced publicly at the start of this year that we are undertaking a major cloud transformation, where we are migrating a good part of our applications to from our on-prem data centers to the cloud. But along the way, as we do that, it's not a lift and shift. It's kind of re-architecting things to conform to a more automated, to a more integrated risk and security kind of pipeline, as I described earlier. And so to enable that, and we chose, we are working with Microsoft Azure as our cloud partner, and to enable all our employees to have kind of the right skills. We opened up certification for Azure, and a variety of training programs built around that.
Mm-hmm.
And our teams had kind of built had some estimates and plans on how many people we would get trained in each quarter, each month, and so on. And we were simply astounded and blown away by the fact that literally within the first 2 months, we went past literally double our goal, and we had more employees kind of signed up all willingly. And this was even before we had formalized trainings at set aside times. People were doing it on their own time, just out of a desire to kind of learn. Yes. And so we went back to our partners and said, we should get more licenses. We should get, and they were equally surprised, because in large banks like ours, they'd never seen the pace of demand, the pace of kind of interest and kind of willingness to learn, which is a huge deal, and it's kind of a huge testament to the kind of the spirit and kind of the quality of our employees.
Well, and the spirit and quality of your employees also speaks to the culture that you are, you're fighting the good fight with the culture at the bank. As you said, it was in pretty good shape when you got there, but I would imagine that keeping that kind of cultural strength in the technology team at US Bank has been helping you retain and recruit the talent you need. Tell us what are some of your advice points to some of your CIO colleagues out there about ways that really make, as you mentioned, make the bank a really good place for technologists to flock to?
So we're very kind of unusual times right now. We have, and as probably any CIO out there would agree with, we are in a very tight labor supply market. All of us are looking for the same sets of skills, and the skills are in short supply. So we kind of the reality is we do need to, and it's not just compensation that'll drive people to work at one place or the other. It's a lot of it has to do with kind of how people perceive kind of the values, kind of, and the cultural context of the work. And we have always, been. We're proud of the fact that we've always been voted as one of the most ethical companies, a company with strong sense of values. And the values have to do with, among other things, how we view ourselves, regardless of a functional organization, as kind of one bank. We take pride in the fact that we are always customer first. We think about what's required for the customer, and then not what's important from a bank standpoint. And we kind of use that to guide our internal explicitly use that to guide our internal practices and policies and processes. And so all of those have been critical. The kind of the most recent change, frankly, was there are two things. First is, as we realize kind of the need for learning, and the fact that given the technology change, it's not going to stop tomorrow. It's not a short-term thing. Today we may have one set of kind of technologies that are at the top. Maybe a year down there'll be something else that shows up. The kind of the need for constant change, the need for constant learning is a big deal, and that's something that we were able to build on. And this particular aspect of a strong culture is frankly what keeps kind of the bonds as we go through kind of the difficulties, the pandemic related kind of changes in how people work, less in the office and a little bit more hybrid and so on. And so those things are very important. And ultimately, it's the way we have to manage through that is all the old-fashioned first principles, where managers spend more time with employees, where there's a lot more opportunity for direct interactions, whether it's remote or in person. And there's an opportunity for people to kind of reach their leadership and have kind of direct dialogue on issues of concern and so on.
Yeah. How have you adopted any regular practices where you are more accessible to anyone on your tech team? Do they all have your mobile number and they can call you at home, that kind of thing?
Yes, sometimes, but those.
I'm kidding. You really shouldn't be doing that.
But in a serious note, I think there are many things we have done. Starting from most of our leaders, and it's actually most managers, send weekly, just very short summary emails to a broad distribution group of what went right this week, progress they made on things that they kind of ran into problems, and things that they're planning to do next week. And that's first is a huge level of communication. It just kind of broadens everyone's awareness, and people use that less as a as a tool for performance evaluation as much as a way to kind of communicate. So you see a huge number of emails that go back and forth between, you said this, kind of what does it mean? Have you considered this, and so on. So there's a lot of that communication. Second, a lot of our formal meetings we have extended. So we have kind of reduced the hierarchy in the sense, traditionally there are cascading sets of meetings. We have tried to reduce the cascades to involving an extended staff in more and more cases, so that people here directly are able to challenge, question, and comment back and forth in a couple of levels of management on the same call on most critical topics. And lastly, just in terms of meeting times, we have more office time set aside, meaning less predicted, planned one-on-ones, but more office time where anyone can kind of reach out and try and kind of connect. So lots of things with kind of varying degrees of implementation, but things that all of them have a huge value.
Yes. All right, good. Let's pivot over to talk about your technology or your business technology priorities going forward into 24. You had mentioned that you did a big data enterprise. You have a data enterprise data strategy that was one of the first things that got tackled a few years ago. What's high on your list these days? What are you doing in for instance, an AI strategy or multiple cloud? What are the big priorities for you going forward?
Because we are in kind of a lot of in a broad, diverse set of businesses, frankly, the list of actual technologies change, but fundamentally, I'd say two or three kind of core things. First is architecting things in a manner in which things are more reusable, and things are kind of well defined as APIs so that they're consumable across all teams. That's critical. They're more like first principles than kind of specific technology names.
Oh, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
We are doing a lot to align. And this architecture is actually a critical one, because what that does is it enables teams to share each other's development kind of a lot more, to build on what someone else is doing, so that they can kind of launch their products faster and for lesser time. And for lesser effort, rather. So that's kind of the fundamental path, apart from things like moving towards more modern development tools and practices, moving towards the cloud as our hosting environment. Very specifically, technologies, as you can think about that, all things to do with data, machine learning, and both essentially raw and imputed data with machine learning, artificial intelligence, things that kind of make sense out of the information, because banking ultimately it's to do with money movement, and things have to do with data movement, and so a lot of it has to do with how do we get the data in as real-time a manner as possible. How do we make insights or extract some additional learnings from that data and use that and make that available to the customer when the customer needs it or when the customer is on site. Certainly, things like blockchain, crypto are we've been very active in those areas. We have a very active innovation program, and we call that. And I say that not because this innovation is something distinct that's done by one team, but we engage. We work with. We keep an eye on kind of variety of new technologies that impact us across each of our different business lines, and we also have a program where we go out to various accelerators or have them come in and present to our teams, so that we can constantly be abreast of what's happening, and teams kind of keep testing things out on an ongoing basis. So there's a lot of that happening. Specifically, I think what you'll end up seeing are what we're looking for end of the day is high value customer use cases of technology, less the technologies themselves. What can we do with them that will drive unusual or high impact for our customers at that point in time.
Right. Now, one of the things, and I'm just curious about this, I talk with a lot of CIOs about moving to a product model, having an engineering mindset, and then also a great deal about customer centricity. How are those related to one another? Is there any conflict between taking a more engineering approach and also trying to keep the team very tuned in to the customer needs and the customer journey? And this is probably me just thinking of customer centricity as something that is more about customer relationships and marketing than it is about engineering, which sounds very science-based. So talk about the relationship between those two, between an engineering product model approach and also staying very customer-centric.
I'd kind of phrase it as customer needs are what you have to get done. A customer has a particular value or an ask or something that we can and should deliver. That's kind of the what we do. The how we do it is with engineering, with technology, with the ability. So they are literally two sides of the same coin. And the important part is to tie them up together, not see them as distinct. For example, if you look at the variety, these as we deal with a lot of large customers as in addition to kind of retail customers. Increasingly, the topic of conversation with our customers is not just the economics and what's the pricing, what's the rate, what's the fee structure, and so on, but it's also, will you get the data in real time? What data will we get in real time? Do you have APIs? Things of that nature. So technology is, and it's a topic of customer need because that's the currency with which our partners, our customers use to derive their value. So increasingly, technology itself sometimes becomes a customer need. In particular, you'll hear a lot about this in banking. People talk about things like open banking, but ultimately what they're saying is the kind of the critical aspects of consumption of the value is not just completing for example, a bill pay or a deposit, but it's also getting the data in real time via an API. As a specific customer need for customers who use that to deliver value for their customers.
Yes. Well, I know one of the big changes that has happened for the bank recently is the acquisition of Union Bank. You're bringing a new entity on board. What of the various topics that we've touched on here today, what is helping making that process go? Does it go more smoothly these days than it did a couple of years ago? I know in your own career, I'm sure you've been through multiple integrations and mergers. And how is this one going? And what is easier or harder than it used to be?
Sure. Yeah, we're very pleased to receive regulatory approval for our acquisition. Union Bank, will significantly, increase our reach to customers. We will now be able to deliver we believe better banking and financial services to a larger number of customers and in areas that we have not served as much in the past. So we're very pleased for that to happen and are looking forward to the actual full conversion, full integration. What has changed now from what used to be before are kind of two or three things. First is with greater clarity and emphasis on data, most of there are now a lot more tools and a lot more visibility and clarity in what you need to do to convert data from bank one to bank two. It's much well understood. It's not the old situation where you have to literally cut a tape from one bank and move it over to another data center and then kind of look at all the changes that you would go through at the last minute. Here, so there's a lot more clarity and visibility into the data in each of the two banks. And so we can kind of figure out, how do you map your data? How do we map our data? And what's the best way to kind of connect the two? Second, there is a much greater clarity on customer interaction and the systems and processes that are required there. So so one of the first things that we are able to do is for the two bank teams to sit and say, what should the final configuration look like for your customers? And we thankfully are in a situation where we believe a kind of superior customer interaction kind of channels. And so our view is here we'll be able to bring on their customers onto our channel, and that automatically will solve. So it's mainly a data conversion issue. Lastly, we're a bank, and ultimately banks are most important thing for banks is risk and regulatory compliance. Yes. Making sure. So we spend a lot of our time in the merger process with ensuring the continued risk and kind of as a compliance posture of the integrated entity. And because we have a very strong underlying discipline in these areas, as we migrate the new bank's data to our the acquired bank's data to our systems, we'll be able to bring that under the envelope of better, more more rigorous and comprehensive risk and regulatory framework.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Great answer. I wanted to pivot over to talking about boards. I know that you have a very tech-savvy board of directors at US Bank right now. You yourself have a lot of board experience and advisory board experience, but also board of director for-profit company experience. What has been particularly helpful to you? What has informed your first banking CIO role with your board experience? What kind of qualities has it helped you bring to the management of this enormous entity that you're running?
I think one of the things that boards increasingly look for, increasingly spend time on, is the governance of technology, and governance of the risk and the practices of technology, understanding kind of the technology strategy. And we are very fortunate in that we have a board that is very understanding, has a good experience and expertise in technology, and does engage in looking at cyber issues, looking at technology issues, and is a thought partner for us. And so that has been kind of very helpful. For us, this is an extension of what we do, and we look at that as our as basically a strength in our governance process.
And your own board experience, what is it about that has helped you be a better CIO?
So when you serve on a board, you're at that point you're not the acting kind of hands-on manager. So so what that trains you a lot, or at least trained me a lot, is what are the questions to ask? How do you understand whether something is going well or not? And that's been quite helpful in when you step back from kind of the operating role, to be able to look across kind of the slate of projects and initiatives and things that we have, to be able to ask kind of the right questions and help guide the teams, and it's been invaluable.
Yes. Well, I know I've talked with a lot of CIOs who, especially as they get toward the mature end of their time as CIOs, are very interested in board service themselves. And some of them, I've talked with some that in their first board experiences almost find that a little uncomfortable, the idea that you can't put your hands on the wheel and just steer things anymore, that it is more of it's a different perspective. And that especially, yeah, and the ones who serve on boards while they're still full-time CIOs, I think actually that may be the best of all worlds, because you get to have those two lenses on the business that you're running.
I fully agree. Very, very well put.
Yes, good. Well, as we wrap up here today, Dilip, I wanted to ask you about your own leadership and what has the pandemic and managing through this pandemic taught you, or what has it changed about your leadership style?
I think this has been, for all of us, very kind of unusual times, and frankly, even post the pandemic, we can say post the pandemic right now, we are in very uncertain times. We have kind of seen macroeconomic kind of indicators that are quite unusual, with both inflation and recession going on at the same time, and the pace of change of those metrics and kind of external developments also just unusually. So these are strange, uncertain times, and I think if I reflect back on kind of things that the learnings, both from before and from kind of the recent past, I'd say it's kind of two or three things. First is it's not what you do, but how you do it. I mean, there've always been kind of problems and challenges, but how do you do it in a manner in which you can kind of solve them in a manner you bring more people along, that makes it more scalable and repeatable as opposed to kind of narrow, and so that you can do it better the next time around, because you're going to encounter challenges kind of going forward. That's one. The second is this whole not just a career, but all the things that you do, all the priorities. It's a marathon, never a sprint. Requires a lot of persistence, kind of a lot of kind of deliberate planning and execution. And there's not a single point in time, while you do need to celebrate kind of frequently, it's not a single point you can say, done, it's over, we have solved everything. Just as you do that, something else shows up. So just remembering that this is all a kind of a marathon, not a sprint. And the last one is something we talked about earlier. Change is constant. Given the constant constancy of change, rather, and the fact it's probably going to be this way for the foreseeable future, it's kind of the need to be open to learning. In my own personal career, and in the pandemic certainly was one, I learned and unlearned a lot of things. I mean, for the most easy example that everyone would relate to is aspects, when we could work from home. I never knew that it's possible to conduct anything remotely, and here we are, where a good part of us are at least spending 2 days a week or so in remote contexts, and kind of a lot more in some cases. But those kinds of things, just being open to looking at facts, looking at data to kind of understand kind of what works, and kind of constantly learning is kind of what's I think the biggest takeaway.
Well, good. Well, I think that all of those qualities have definitely marked what you've done so far. And I'm tempted to ask you, of all your different jobs and positions, which one has been your favorite so far?
There's no question. The current one is my favorite, and I'm actually very privileged to be in a great organization like this, and with a team that's just kind of phenomenal. So I'm very thankful for that.
Well, I'm very biased to the idea that the CIO's job is the greatest job in the world. I think it's the toughest job in the world, but it's also one of the greatest ones. Thank you so much for joining me today for this conversation. It's been wonderful having you here, and I appreciate all the depth of intellect and your responses. It has been terrific. Thank you, Dilip.
Enjoyed the conversation with you, Maryfran. Thank you for having me here.
Excellent. If you joined us late today, do not despair. You can watch the full episode later here today on LinkedIn, on our CIO online channel, but also on our new YouTube channel, on CIO's YouTube channel. And CIO Leadership Live is available as an audio podcast as well. So wherever you find your podcasts, if it's easier to listen to the conversation today, we invite you to do that as well. I hope you enjoyed this discussion today with Dilip Venkatachari, who is the CIO, Chief Information and Technology Officer of US Bank globally. And we look forward to seeing you next time. I'll be back on Wednesday, November 9th at noon Eastern, and I'll have the Chief Technology Officer of Silicon Bank with me, Ivnet Karoor. Thanks so much again for joining us today. And please take a moment to subscribe to our CIO channel on YouTube so that you don't miss any of these amazing episodes talking with CIOs. You can find today's show there and all of our previous episodes of CIO Leadership Live. Stay well, and thanks for joining, and we'll see you here next time.